There's something incredibly powerful about mystery. And I don't mean playing games or hiding who you are. I'm talking about the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you don't need to give someone every detail of your emotional life just to be seen or validated. In fact, one of the most underappreciated forms of strength is the ability to hold back, to not overshare. Because when you meet a man, especially early on, you are not obligated to hand him the keys to your emotional biography. You might feel tempted to explain everything, your last heartbreak, the childhood pain, the betrayals, the scars you're still healing from. And sometimes that temptation doesn't come from a need to connect. It comes from a hidden belief that you need to justify why you are the way you are. But let's reframe that. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your complexity. You are allowed to show up whole, quiet about the chapters that still ache without guilt. The problem with oversharing too soon is that it creates a false sense of intimacy. It feels like closeness, but what it really does is hand over too much power before you know what someone will do with it. When you expose your most vulnerable truths to someone who hasn't demonstrated consistent care or emotional maturity, you're giving them insight into where you're soft, without knowing if they have the character to protect it. You might think you're deepening the connection, but you're actually teaching them what strings to pull, consciously or unconsciously. Even more subtle is the way this imbalance shifts the relational dynamic. If you're the one laying everything bare while he's still holding back, you've unintentionally made him the observer of your emotional world rather than an equal participant. It places him in a position of control and you in a posture of seeking approval or comfort. That's not connection. That's exposure without protection. It's not about being secretive. It's about being discerning. Real intimacy isn't a one-way performance of vulnerability. It's a dance of mutual unfolding. It's when you both reveal yourselves gradually over time in a way that feels safe, earned, and balanced. And that slow build, that's where real emotional connection lives. Think about it like this. If your life was a library, not everyone deserves access to the rare book section. Some people are only meant to browse the covers until they've proven they can handle the weight of the story. So the next time you feel the need to pour out your emotional past in the hopes of bonding with someone, pause, breathe. Remember that your story is sacred. Let them earn it page by page. And here's the truth. When you honor your mystery, you invite respect. You stop seeking connection through exposure and start building it through discernment. And in doing so, you protect not just your heart, but your power. There's a fine line between honesty and emotional leakage. One of the most important things a woman can learn to guard, especially in the early stages of a relationship, is her unprocessed insecurity. And I say that not because insecurity is shameful, we all have it, but because sharing what you haven't yet made peace with puts you in a fragile position. If you're still battling the internal noise of I'm not enough or I'm too much, and you hand that over to someone prematurely, it invites them into a space that you haven't even learned how to navigate safely. There's this cultural narrative that says vulnerability equals intimacy. And while vulnerability is absolutely a bridge to connection, there's a catch. Vulnerability without boundaries isn't connection. It's exposure. When you tell a man you hate your body, that you feel insecure around other women, or that you constantly compare yourself to others, before you've healed those stories, you're not creating a bond. You're unconsciously asking him to take care of the parts of you that you haven't fully taken responsibility for. That's not intimacy. That's emotional outsourcing. Let me be clear. This isn't about being perfect before you date. No one is asking you to arrive in a relationship as a finished product, but there's a big difference between sharing your truth from a place of strength versus from a place of needing reassurance. When a woman speaks from her center, when she says, "There was a time I struggled with this, but I've worked through it," that lands very differently than a confession made in the hope that he'll fix or validate her. And here's where it gets deeper. The moment you reveal those raw insecurities, a subtle psychological shift occurs. You're no longer just the woman he's discovering. You're now someone he may begin to assess, define, even manage emotionally. Not out of malice, but because he's now aware of your internal struggles before he's built genuine emotional investment. And without that foundation of respect and commitment, those revelations can easily morph into liabilities in his mind instead of invitations to understand you more deeply. What I want you to take away from this is simple. Your insecurity does not need to be your introduction. Your strength, your energy, your curiosity, those are the parts of you that should lead. The rest can come later, in pieces, when it feels natural, when trust has been built, and when your story is no longer bleeding. Because when you speak from a healed place, even your pain becomes power. So the next time you're tempted to share the darkest thoughts you have about yourself just to feel seen, ask yourself, have I done the work to hold this, or am I hoping he will? Because the most magnetic women are not the ones who expose every scar, but the ones who've made peace with them and speak only from the strength they've earned. Money has a strange way of changing the temperature of a relationship. It doesn't matter whether you're making six figures or struggling to keep your head above water. When you start revealing financial details too early, you risk shifting the emotional dynamic before the relationship has found its footing. That's because money carries symbolic weight. It doesn't just represent income. It reflects independence, value, power, lifestyle, and often vulnerability. When a woman shares the full scope of her financial reality before trust and commitment are in place, she unintentionally introduces a layer of complexity that the relationship may not yet be equipped to handle. Let's say you tell a man that you're in debt, or that you're supporting your family, or even that you've been incredibly successful. While those facts may be true, they're also loaded with meaning. And depending on the man's maturity, values, and emotional conditioning, that information can create pressure, insecurity, or even subconscious entitlement. In some cases, you might be treated differently, seen as a burden if you're struggling, or as a safety net if you're thriving. Either way, the relationship becomes colored by numbers, not character. And that's dangerous, because real connection should be built on who you are, not what's in your bank account. If a man begins to calculate your worth or potential compatibility based on what you can provide financially, he's relating to a role, not to you. This isn't about hiding your life. It's about pacing. You're allowed to keep your financial reality private until you understand who this person is beyond the charm, the dates, the compliments. Does he respect women's independence? Does he have a track record of responsibility? Does he see relationships as partnerships or opportunities for control and advantage? You can't answer those questions on the first tee. It's few dates. And until you can, your financial story is sacred. There's also a deeper layer to this. Sharing financial struggles or successes prematurely can create an invisible power imbalance. If you disclose too soon that you're struggling, you may feel disempowered, leading to shame or dependency. If you disclose that you're thriving, you might become a target for emotional manipulation, or worse, unconscious emasculation. Men who are still attaching their identity to how much they earn may feel threatened, not inspired by a financially independent woman. And none of this means you should dim your light or hide your reality forever. But you do need to recognize that not everyone is entitled to your numbers. What matters more is how you carry your reality. Confidence, discretion, and boundaries signal that you're not looking for someone to save you or to be impressed by you. You're looking for someone who aligns with your values, not your wallet. So before you offer a spreadsheet of your finances to someone you barely know, ask yourself, am I sharing from a place of trust, or from a place of wanting to be understood too quickly? Because when you lead with self-respect instead of full disclosure, you teach others how to value the person, not the paycheck. There's this moment early in dating where it feels like opening up about your past is the right thing to do. You want to be honest, transparent. Maybe you feel a spark and think, if I just tell him everything, we'll get closer faster. But when it comes to your dating history, especially the messy, complicated, deeply personal parts, revealing too much too soon doesn't build intimacy. It distorts it. Sharing all the details about your past relationships, how many people you've been with, who broke your heart, who cheated, who you cheated on, the toxic cycle you stayed in too long, can feel cathartic in the moment. You might think it makes you look open and self-aware, but what often happens is that it gives the other person a psychological blueprint of your patterns before they've even earned the right to understand your complexity. Human nature being what it is, people interpret what you tell them through their own biases and insecurities. A man who hasn't done deep emotional work may start comparing himself to your exes, or he may start assessing your worth based on how clean or chaotic your past sounds to him. And let's be honest, people judge, even when they don't realize they're doing it. You don't need to give someone ammunition to build a narrative about you when they haven't even taken the time to know who you are now. Your past relationships are chapters in a book that shaped you, but they are not required reading for someone who's just started the prologue. And when you lay your history bare too soon, especially the raw parts you haven't fully processed, you shift the emotional weight of the interaction. Now, he's not just getting to know you, he's managing how he feels about your past. That changes the dynamic. Instead of building something new together, you're dragging both of you through stories that belong in the rearview mirror. More importantly, a relationship history belongs to you. Not because you have something to hide, but because you have something to protect. Your peace, your dignity, and your right to define yourself based on who you've become, not what you've endured. When a relationship matures and there's safety, trust, and mutual investment, that's when you can reveal those deeper truths, not as a way to impress or explain yourself, but as a way to deepen real understanding. So here's the bottom line. Don't make your past the proof of your worth. Make your present the demonstration of your growth. Let a man earn the right to hear the deeper stories, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you respect yourself enough to know that your history isn't a confession. It's a gift, and only the right person deserves the privilege of unwrapping it, one layer at a time. One of the most overlooked yet deeply consequential mistakes women make in early dating is revealing their unfiltered thoughts about a man's family or friends. It might seem harmless. Maybe he talks about his brother who always shows up late, or you meet his best friend who strikes you as immature or arrogant. And in the name of being honest or just keeping it real, you let your guard down and say what you're thinking. But here's the hard truth. Early opinions carry long shadows. Once you speak them, you can't take them back. And you may not realize the emotional damage they cause until it's too late. What you say about the people he loves, even if he complains about them himself, speaks directly to how safe he feels with you. A man can rant about his mother for 10 minutes and still be fiercely loyal to her. That contradiction exists in all of us. We can be frustrated with our loved ones, but that doesn't mean we want the people we're dating to criticize them. It's one thing for him to vent and another thing entirely for you to validate his frustration with a critical remark of your own. Now, you're not just listening, you're judging. And in his subconscious mind, that might translate as disloyalty. More importantly, early stage relationships are fragile. Emotional trust is still forming. Every opinion you express is a brick in the foundation or a crack. And when you voice your disapproval about someone he's emotionally tied to, you insert a subtle tension into the connection. He may not call it out, but it sits there quietly, resentfully. Over time, it becomes harder for him to bring those people up around you. He might feel like he has to defend them or choose between being open with you and protecting them. That's a position no one wants to be in. This doesn't mean you have to fake approval. You're allowed to have opinions, and you're allowed to notice red flags. But wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to hold your tongue. Discretion isn't deception. It's emotional intelligence. There's power in pausing, observing, and letting the relationship unfold before placing judgment. Once trust is solid and the emotional connection is stable, then there may be space to offer feedback delicately, respectfully, and only when it truly matters. The truth is, the way you handle the people in his life often reflects how you'll handle him, especially when he's vulnerable, flawed, or frustrating. If he sees that you can approach differences with grace and restraint, he'll feel safer letting you into deeper parts of his world. So next time you're tempted to speak your mind about his messy roommate, his overbearing sister, or his unreliable friend, not yet. Let your silence speak of maturity, not agreement. Because the woman who leads with empathy and patience earns far more trust than the one who leads with judgment disguised as honesty. There's a delicate balance between being clear about what you want and overwhelming someone with your long-term plans before the relationship has even had a chance to breathe. And here's where so many women fall into a trap, not out of desperation, but out of a desire for honesty. You meet someone who seems promising and you think, let me just be upfront. I want a serious relationship. I want kids in 3 years. I don't want to waste time. And while all of that might be true and even admirable, dropping your entire vision for the future on a man in the early stages can feel less like clarity and more like pressure. Not because your desires are wrong, but because the timing of your disclosure shapes how he perceives the relationship's purpose. Men, like women, need space to arrive at their own emotional decisions. If you outline your entire 5-year plan on date 2, you might think you're filtering out the wrong guys, and in a way you are. But you're also denying both of you the chance to let something real develop organically. A relationship isn't a business deal, and you're not presenting terms and conditions. It's a dynamic, evolving bond between two people who are still figuring out who the other person really is. Let that process happen before you try to define where it's going. This doesn't mean you should hide your values or be vague about your standards. If you're looking for commitment and long-term partnership, that's something you should stand firm in. But there's a huge difference between sharing your values and offloading your timeline. One invites connection, the other initiates negotiation. And connection should always come first. There's also a psychological aspect to this. When you reveal too much too soon, when you say things like, I want to be married by this age, with this many kids, living in this kind of place, you turn the man into a chara, catering a script he hasn't agreed to yet. He starts wondering whether you actually like him or whether you just like the idea of someone who can plug into your vision. That pressure, even if unintentional, can push him away, not because your desires are too much, but because they're arriving too fast. What's more powerful than declaring your plan is showing your value. When a man experiences you as grounded, emotionally intelligent, independent, and joyful, he'll naturally become curious about how you see your future. And when he asks, you won't need to convince him. You'll just need to speak from clarity, not urgency. So next time you're tempted to lay your entire roadmap on the table too soon, remember, timing is everything. Let the relationship show you its potential before you assign it a destination. Because a powerful woman doesn't chase the future. She chooses the right present and trusts that the right man will walk beside her into it